My name is Milford McGirt. I serve as the chair for the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. And on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for coming out this morning to be a part of our second Critical Issues Forum for 2017. We've got a very exciting program for you today, and I think it's going to be very interesting. It's funny, we're starting a little bit behind our starting time here, but we typically start later around 10:30, and so we're still ahead of schedule. As I was, we're still ahead of schedule. I want to also thank AT&T. AT&T has been our corporate sponsor for the Critical Issues Forum for a number of years, great corporate partner, and very supportive to sort of help to sponsor the program here. As I was thinking about our program and as we plan these Critical Issue Forums, one of the things I think as a board and as a management team for the partnership, we talk about so what? What is the issue? Why are we talking about the issues we're talking about? And I think today I wanted to share a little bit of data with you and perspectives on the Georgia Partnership and this particular topic. First of all, in terms of boards, this is probably one of the most diverse board of directors for a not-for-profit that I've been involved with. We have on the Georgia Partnership Board, we have business leaders, several business leaders bringing the perspective of business. We've got champions for economic development. You'll hear from Chris Carr in a moment, who leads the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. We also have representation from the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. We have state legislators that are actively participating on our board as well. Senator Fran Miller is here today, somewhere in the crowd, and he's sitting in the back. He's got to leave a little early. I'm very happy to see Fran here. Fran chairs the Education Committee for the legislature as well. We also have education advocates. We have superintendents represented. We have the PTA represented. We have Student of the Year represented on our board as well. And it's interesting, it's K through 12. We have higher education. The chancellor for the University System of Georgia is on our board as well. So it brings a tremendous amount of diversity and perspectives around primarily education, the whole spectrum and ecosystem of education, but also business and economic development and workforce. And I think that leads into a real compelling component of why we're talking about the issue today and really the so what. Before I introduce Beverly, I wanted to share some statistics with you. Many of you may have seen that the state of Georgia, in terms of the environment for doing business, was ranked second out of the 50 states, which is very positive. So let's give our state a hand on that. Chris, I hope I don't steal too much of your thunder here on that. I know you're going to touch on this, but there are 10 components that they rank states on in terms of the business environment being favorable for business. And the number one topic and the heaviestly weighted one is on workforce. So this topic today about closing the skills gap is very compelling in that regard. Just for information purposes, the other 9 elements include infrastructure, including transportation and the infrastructure to be able to commerce there, the cost of doing business, which obviously very important, the economy, the health of the economy, quality of life, in general, overall for prospective employees. Technology and innovation, also very critical. And we're very fortunate to have a number of higher educational institutions that provide talent there as well. Number 7 is education. Number 8 is business friendliness in terms of having laws and regulations that make it conducive. Cost of living for employees and access to capital is the 10th component. So again, an interesting topic. Very favorable for our state to be represented in that regard. And I think today's topic is really going to help build that out and be compelling. So without further ado, I'd like to take the opportunity to ask Beverly Ferguson. She's the Director of Community Affairs for Georgia Pacific and our host for today's program. I'd like her to come up and say a few words. Beverly, give her a hand, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Milford, for the introduction, and also thank you for really doing my welcome and tying everything that we're going to talk about today in this Critical Issues Forum. On behalf of Christian Fisher, our CEO of Georgia Pacific, Curly Dossman, the president of the Georgia Pacific Foundation, our entire cadre of employees, thank you for being here. We're happy to host you here today. It's not our first time hosting the partnership. It's really great to work on education issues, which is one of our 4 E's here, our focus areas: education, entrepreneurship, environmental issues, and enrichment of communities. So this ties in really well. We've been a great partner with Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education for years. And this is really full circle for me. When I first moved to Georgia in 2001, the Georgia Partnership was the first board service that I tapped into, thanks to Sonny Walker, God bless his soul, who's not here. And you talk about a diverse organization and a diverse board. You are absolutely right. And Steve taking the helm from Upchurch, Tom Upchurch, way back in the day. How many of you remember Tom? You've been here long enough to remember Tom. So it's a really, really great opportunity to be here to discuss these issues, and we are so delighted to host you. Thank you.
Thank you again, Beverly, and thank Georgia Pacific for being here. So real quick, y'all fasten your seatbelts and get ready. I'm gonna ask Steve Dolinger, who's our CEO for the Georgia Partnership, to come up and give you some information, and that will lead into the program. So Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Critical Issue Forum. It seems like every one we've been having the last 6 months to a year tends to be a larger group. Earlier on, the registrations for this one was the largest one yet. But with things happening in Atlanta, of course, we have a percent of people who can't make it, but still a good crowd, and thank you for being here for this important topic. Typically, if you look at your agenda, typically this time I give you an overview from the partnership. Because of the tightness of the schedule of some of our speakers and panel members, I'm going to put that at the end. You can see I'll come back up and do that later after the panel. Milford just asked me, instead of him coming back up yet again, if I could just close out. So that will be the last part. So if you hang in there for that, that'll be very brief. Also, I want to point out to you that behind the agenda are the bios of our speakers. So as we invite them to come up to speak, it'll be more brief than to go through all of that, but at least you can read that when you get a chance. Just to tee this up a little bit again, I like to kind of put it in a current context, even though you know this is a big issue. We've been talking about this for quite some time in Georgia. Just yesterday, there was a national report released from the National Governors Association and the National Association of State Workforce Liaisons, asking governors to be more involved in workforce development strategies, including at the higher education level. Then just this morning in the AJC, there's an article talking about what's happening down at West Georgia Tech and Coweta County. They're working with the German-American Embassy, trying to help in that whole workforce piece. And it's not just to get more kids out of high school, but it's also kids who go through that program will not only get their high school diploma. This is dual enrollment, West Georgia Tech and the Coweta County school systems. High school diploma, an associate's degree, and a certified industry apprenticeship, possibly a job, and no college debt. How can we say no to those kinds of programs? And these are information technology. These are pretty high school jobs, which would later encourage these kids to go on. And the partnership down in that neck of the woods also involves University of West Georgia. You may recall at one of our forums last year, we had their president on a panel talking about how they are working with Move On When Ready, and some of these pieces are kind of a leader across our state, even though others are involved. So now, let me bring up our leadoff hitter, Chris Clark. Chris is the president and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. You can read more about that, but the part that really helps us tell this message is that Chris and I are good colleagues. He has been involved in our Economics of Education program. They've been a sponsor of that for the last several years. We serve on one another's board. We understand the synergy and the need to have education and workforce, education and business working together. But you'll see that he has an array of experiences, local, state, and national, but he also has had success. Success individually in leading that organization with the Georgia Trend magazine and Atlanta Business Chronicle. But what's not in his bio that just happened a couple of weeks ago, the National Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives awarded the Georgia Chamber as the State Chamber of the Year. With that, Chris Clark. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning. I think you can do a little better than that. I'm with the Chamber of Commerce, right? So, good morning. All right, that's much better. Thank y'all so much. And thank you, Steve, for asking me to kick it off this morning and share with you some data and some information. So good to be with so many of you. Most of you know who the Georgia Chamber is. For those of you that don't, we're 102 years old. We just celebrated our 100th anniversary in 2015. We have about 40,000 members in every single county in Georgia. And every local Chamber of Commerce in Georgia is part of our network. And we're very proud of that team and that team approach. That partnership statewide led us last year to go around the state asking questions of our members and local leaders about what do we need to do to continue to make sure that Georgia is a great place to do business, that we maintain our top ranking for the best place to grow jobs. That led to a lot of input, a lot of new data, and it led us to a new strategic plan, and I won't bore you with all the details of that strategic plan, but one of the things that our members, and particularly our local chambers, asked for was that we want more data to better understand what's happening in our communities. We know that Atlanta continues to grow, the coast continues to grow, but most of rural Georgia is still lagging way, way behind. It's never recovered after our 2 recessions, and we want to know why. And so my Center for Competitiveness, which is our internal think tank at the Chamber, developed this presentation. I'm going to give you just a little piece of it today. It's much longer. You can get these slides in about 3 or 4 weeks at ga2030.com. It'll be more in-depth than what I'm giving you today, but there's essentially 2 parts of this presentation. The first part is what's actually happening around the state. And then the second part is what are the strategies and what should we be focused on as far as future jobs go, and what are the opportunities for economic growth around Georgia. So I'm going to move through this quickly, yell out if you've got a question about it, but that's what I'm going to try to get through in the next 20 minutes. Okay, good? Same page? Understand? Okay, great. So we're the best place to do business by some rankings. We're number 2, as Milford referred to, by another ranking. But our question at the beginning of last year was, if we want to continue that ranking, what do we really need to focus on? What's going to determine that ranking in the future? And so we started pulling data in all kinds of sectors, and this is just a little snapshot that we pulled up. And the fact that Georgia still ranks 33rd in K through 12 education is not an indicator of a state that ought to continue to be the best place to do business. That's not good enough for us. We can't be 31st in legal climate, 36th in tax climate. We can't be a state that has ranked 45th for people living below poverty. That's not going to get the job done long term. We can't be 33rd in obesity. Why do we talk about obesity? Because it's such a leading indicator of every other health problem that's out there. And y'all, we're still 44th in dropout rate. Thank God for all of those states to the west of us that hug the Gulf Coast, right? They boost us up a little bit. And so, as a state, we have to care about these other statistics if we want to continue to grow. So these statistics are already impacting us in another way. The Economic Innovation Group is an outside organization. A lot of my peers use their data. They rank every county in the country as distressed, as prosperous, or borderline distressed. And there's some mix in the rankings there. But we pulled through all the data around the country and pulled out this data for Georgia. Nationwide, 20% of all of our counties are distressed. What does distressed mean? It means that people aren't working, more people are living in poverty, people are leaving that community, jobs are leaving that community, things are not going well, right? And so nationwide, 20% of all the counties are distressed. And they are largely our rural communities, right? If you looked at the Black Belt from Virginia that sweeps down over to Texas and much of the Midwest, y'all, in Georgia, 53% of our counties are distressed. 53%. How can we continue to be a prosperous state if we don't address that? The counties in gold on your map are doing very well. They're going to continue to grow, continue to add people. Their economy is going to do very well. The counties in gray are kind of borderline. Some of them are right on the bubble. Their leaders need to make a decision. Are we going to tackle our issues so that we can move forward, or are we just going to be content in who we are and we're better than our football rivals next door? We can go home now. And I know, and you know some communities that are like that, don't you? This is family. We can have that kind of conversation. The counties in white are distressed. I know what you're doing. Some of you who are not geographically challenged are looking at the map and you're going, well, there's some of these rural communities, you know, why is that county gray and a little better than their neighbors? I will tell you that many of our rural communities are doing a little bit better right now simply because they have prisons in their community. That's not the thing you want to help your statistics grow, right? And so if we know, and this looks at probably 8 to 10 different statistical areas. And so then we pulled back from this data and said, all right, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's look at some more data. Well, here's the one everybody cares about. It's job growth, right? That's the leading indicator. If we're growing jobs, our economy's going to do okay. Things are going to be great. If you haven't read James Clifton's The Coming Jobs War, put that on your list. Go home and read it. It's a quick, easy read. Great data and a great explanation that wars of the future, with the exception of maybe North Korea, are going to be fought over jobs, right? Communities are going to spar each other over jobs, and that's who's going to win. So how are we doing? Well, on the left, you see 2010 through 2015, as we came out of the second recession, let's see if this works. So U.S., we had about an 8.3% job growth. Georgia was 9.6, Atlanta 10. The counties in gold had significant job growth. The counties in gray had some job growth, probably 1 to 4%. The counties in white, all these counties lost jobs 2010 through 2015. Okay, big deal, who cares? That's what happened in the past. Where are we going in the future? If we don't do anything, if we ignore all the problems, those other statistics we talked about, this is what Georgia is going to look like by 2026. Job growth is still going to be above the national average thanks to Atlanta. For those of you wondering, hub counties are the 8 counties in Georgia that have over 65,000 workers in them today. Most of the rest of the state is rural. Y'all, rural job growth is going to almost be cut in half. All the counties in white, look how many more counties in white we have here in 2026. All of these counties are scheduled to lose jobs. If those counties lose jobs, can the tax base keep up? Are people going to move there? Are kids going to stay? No. Are the school systems going to be great? No. Are you going to keep your hospitals open? No. All those things matter. They all matter on what this looks like. That's a pretty sad map. We won't continue to be the best place to do business if this map becomes reality. Here's job growth. Well, what's the other part of job growth? Number of businesses, right? So this is a fascinating map. If you just take a second and let me show you. 1990 through 2000. Counties in gold had significant growth in new businesses in their community. Counties in gray had some growth. Counties in white lost businesses during that time. You actually had a higher growth rate of businesses in rural Georgia than you had in Atlanta. The 1990s were very good, very prosperous for many rural communities. And then we had a recession, and then another recession, and we keep going. And so look at 2010 through 2014. All the counties in white lost businesses. Businesses closed up, number of business licenses went down. Those companies moved, and with them, so moved the jobs. So what happened between the 1990s and the first decade and a half of this century? My good friend Pat Topping and Mark Lytle are here. They know this better than I do. Anybody here ever been in real estate before? Couple recovering real estate people? What do you say? What do real estate people tell you all the time? It's all about location, right? It's location, location, location. That's why Jody and I live in Peachtree City, Fayette County, because of location, location, location. That was what we sold. Economic development changed, though, after that first recession. It became about talent, talent, talent. Communities that could recruit and retain workers, could recruit businesses. Those that couldn't would lose. Why has Mercedes-Benz moved to Atlanta? Access to talent. Why is State Farm adding 12,000 jobs up at the perimeter? Because of access to talent. Why is the Metro Atlanta region spending $23 million to recruit millennials? Because of talent. Talent is the defining issue for economic development going forward. Location still matters. You got to have a port, you got to have an airport, you want to have an interstate. But it's really all about talent now. And many of our communities didn't keep up. They didn't make sure they had great schools. They didn't make sure that their colleges continued to do well. And one thing they did is they let all their kids move away and never come back home. This is going to be one of the defining issues for us. And so let's look at some of the data here. If we know it's about talent, what's the future look like for Georgia? So first of all, we've basically got 3 issues to deal with here as far as talent goes in Georgia. The first one is the gray tsunami that is coming to Georgia. I see a few members of you out there who are part of the gray tsunami. This is the largest number of retirees in the history of our country. The largest number. All the baby boomers are heading for the doors, heading to the North Georgia mountains or down to the coast, and that's going to have an impact. Here's 2015, the counties in white have more than 25% of their population as senior citizens. After the gray tsunami finishes about 2030, look at how many counties now have over 25% of their population as senior citizens. The counties in gray are 20 to 25%. The counties in gold are less than 20. Rural Georgia, everybody in rural Georgia, 22%, almost a quarter, will be senior citizens. What does that mean for local leaders, local government leaders? It means less taxes, less sales taxes, more homestead exemptions, right? It means more people needing social benefits, more people needing transportation, more people needing health care services. We'll show you that slide in just a minute. This is a huge shift. We're going to have 1 million job openings in Georgia. 1 million in the next 6 years, just from senior citizens alone. Who's going to fill those jobs? Will these senior citizens want to come back into the workforce? Can we entice them back in? What do we do to keep them engaged? What's going to happen to all their businesses that their kids moved away and don't want to run anymore? Well, what about the current workforce? What about the people that are out there today? We rank 40th in the country for adults not working. Now, we do adjust this data for adults that don't want to work and those that can't work. Okay? So these are able-bodied people, 25 to 64, that ought to be out there producing in their communities. The counties in gold mean that less than 35% of your adult workers are unemployed or outside the workforce. Gray is 35 to 45%. The counties in white, y'all, have over 45% of their adults not working today. There are some counties, you can imagine, I go do this presentation. It's about the 50th time I've done this presentation since May. I go into some very rural communities, and I've had to tell some of these communities, 64% of your adults aren't working today. How in the hell can your community continue to thrive when people aren't working? But we try to get people to understand, how can you move those folks back into the workforce? What do they tell us? There are drug issues, right? Transportation issues, lack of credentialing, difficulty getting their degree, all these things. And so we're trying to encourage communities to develop strategies, work with educators, so that we can move those people back into the workforce. That's the first, easiest, low-hanging fruit to do right there. What are we doing constructively in many of these communities to get people working again? So we've got to deal with the senior citizens. We've got to move the folks that should be working back into the workforce. And then we got to talk about the workforce of the future. How many of you are tired of talking about millennials? I asked that question recently, and one young woman raised her hand, and she looked around, she goes, "I'm the only one in the room, and I'm tired of you talking about me." I said, well, good news. We're going to talk less about you in the future and more about the Zers. Anybody know about the Zers yet? This is the generation after the millennials. If you've got a kid in school today, they're probably a Zer. I've got one. He just started 6th grade last week. What does it look like in Georgia? So, between now and 2030, here's the breakdown. Here's our millennial map. U.S., you're going to see about a 7% growth in millennials in the workforce. Georgia at 10%. Atlanta's going to grow their millennial workforce by 25%. But it is a concerted effort to do so. What about the rest of Georgia? Our hub counties will lose 2.5%, so will our rural communities. The counties in white will lose millennial workers by 2030 if they don't make changes in their communities. Here's the thing. Most of you are my age or maybe a little bit older. A lot of you may be a lot younger. When we were growing up, Steve and I, wherever the job was, we'd go move to that job, right? Didn't matter where it was, it's where we're going to go. These workers don't think that way. They're going to go where they want to have a great quality of life, and the jobs will follow them. Mercedes-Benz just proved that. The jobs will follow them. So what are communities doing to keep these workers? So what's the strategy locally about how you keep and turn the tide with millennials? And then the next question is, what do you do about Generation Z? This map looks even worse. This is a much smaller group, but this group is important because they're the ones that are going to replace Generation X. So the millennials are going to take all you baby boomers' jobs. Generation Z is going to take all of us Generation X jobs when we retire. The counties in white are going to lose Generation Z. Now, interesting thing about this map, there are a few communities here that you're looking at, and you're saying, why are those counties going to grow Gen Z? Anybody want to guess what those communities have in common? Military and colleges and universities. The question for a Valdosta, I don't know if we have anybody here from Valdosta, the question that I ask them is, what are you doing to keep those kids once they graduate college? What can you do? One of the things you've got to do with Generation Z right now is to make sure that they're prepared for the workforce. And I know I'm preaching to the crowd here. This is part of the message that usually really hits home with lay people that I talk to around the state that aren't in education every day. And I ask them, I said, what's the leading indicator for whether or not one of your students in school today is going to be successful and be a leader when they go forward? You all know the answers. Are they reading at third grade level, right? We preach that. All of you have taught me that over the years. Well, y'all, the numbers suck here. Georgia only has 35% of our kids reading at third grade level. Our rural communities are at 33%. The counties in gold mean you're doing okay. 40% or more of your kids are reading at grade level. Counties in gray are 25 to 45%. But look how many white counties are on this map, which means less than 25% of their third graders are ready to go and reading at grade level. Now, I had a community the other day, and they're like, hey, we look pretty good. I was like, really? I asked them which community, and they were in gray, and I looked it up and said, yeah, you're at 39%. And they're like, yeah. And I said, no. I mean, 61% of your kids aren't reading. And they're like, oh. I was like, you missed statistics. Growing up, fair enough. But we want our communities to understand they need to have. I talked to the Buckhead Rotary Club on Monday of this week, and we showed them this slide, and immediately they started saying, what do we do? And I said, the easiest thing to do is to allow your employees to go into the schools and mentor. Let them go in and read to kids. I know in my school, when I go in with my son, I always see a business person sitting over here reading to a kid, and they're there 2 or 3 times a week to help that kid get to grade level. That's the easiest thing to do. And so if you've got those programs, if that's in your community, help connect the business community back to understand those things. So if we know a little bit about the talent pipeline and what we've got to look for, then the question for communities is, what do we do? What's our strategy? What do we need to do to be ready? Well, part of that's knowing which jobs are most likely to be in your communities, what you should focus on. So many economic developers in Georgia use a shotgun approach. They just want to shoot anything that flies over and claim anything that falls in their community. And that worked, Pat, when we started years and years ago. But today, you got to have a rifle approach. You got to know what you're going after. And so the first thing we do, jobs of the future. This is a nationwide perspective, and I'm not going to read you all the details. You can look and see what the growths are going to be. These are going to be the fastest growing job sectors countrywide. I'm going to show you the state one in just a minute. But here's a statistic I think is really important for you to understand. For every $1 that one of these workers makes in a metro area, they'll only make 80 cents if they live in a second tier or a second tier city, like a Macon or a Columbus or an Augusta. But if they choose to stay in rural Georgia, 67 cents on the dollar. I've been talking to business leaders lately in some rural communities that have come to the realization that they built their community, they built their company there on the premise of cheap labor. But if they want to stay there, they're going to have to pay above a prevailing wage. They're actually now going to pay more for talent in rural communities as they would pay if they went to a larger community. But the cost of doing business is still less there. And so we have to explain that to community leaders, we have to explain that to businesses. You have to look at this a little bit differently. But what about Georgia? So what's going to happen by 2026, so in the next 9 years, Georgia's going to add around 500,000, just under 500,000 new jobs that don't exist today. We're going to need to replace 1.1 million seniors that are going to retire. Y'all, that's a workforce swift change of about 1.5 million jobs in 10 years. That's dramatic. That's unlike anything we've ever seen in this state. Where are those jobs going to be? Bless you. We're going to add 100,000 healthcare workers. Somebody's got to take care of all the gray tsunamiers, right? So the question becomes, in many communities, if you've got a healthcare facility, do kids understand that they can take those jobs and move into there? Are we really understanding? Sidebar for a minute. I had a group of 30 high school seniors in a few weeks ago to see me from a fairly a community that's doing well in rural Georgia. And I really wanted to drive home the importance of staying home once they graduated, right? And so I asked the question, how many of you would like to go back to your community once you graduate from college or technical college? I had 30 in the room. How many of them do you think raised their hand? 3, 4, 0. One little cute little girl raised her hand, and she did it kind of like this, right? And I was like, all right, here she is. I can make my point. And I leaned in. I was like, why do you want to stay home? And she goes, my boyfriend. Like, and tell you now, that relationship's not going to make it. Not exactly what I was looking for at all. But then we changed the script. And so I looked over at a friend of mine, Jeff, who is the bank president in this community, who brought the kids up. And I said, Jeff, when are you going to retire? He said, 5 years. I was like, who's going to take your job when you retire? He goes, I don't know. And we started talking about the jobs that are available in that community. These kids had no idea. One kid finally raised his hand. He goes, you know, my dad says he's going to retire in about 10 years from his medical practice, but I don't know who's going to take care of his patients. I said, what about you? He goes, I want to be a doctor, but I never even thought that I could do that. We're not telling our kids the opportunities that exist in their own communities. We're not connecting them back with what the opportunities are. Heaven forbid, shame on us. Instead of telling every kid, go away and fly, tell them, go away and come home. We're actually now starting to see millennials that are understanding they can't afford to live in town. And they're looking for different. So what are those opportunities out there? So getting back on track, sorry. Healthcare, 100,000 new jobs. Professional scientific jobs, 50,000 more in the next 9 years. Construction jobs, which is good. That's a canary in the coal mine for us. We're going to continue to grow and continue to do well. What are some of the industry sectors that are going to do well in Georgia? Well, one of the things that we concentrate on, particularly for rural Georgia, is where are the economic engines? And are those economic engines connected back with educators in their communities? Oftentimes they're not. And so what you see here are manufacturers in Georgia that have over 250 employees, and these are facilities, military bases, different groups that have over 1,000 employees. We have to make it a priority to keep these companies here. Doesn't matter what we can recruit in, we got to keep these guys because they're paying taxes. They're our drivers of our economy right now. So what does it look like? Advanced manufacturing for Georgia is going to continue to grow. We're seeing reshoring now. Companies that left us at the height of NAFTA are now moving back. These jobs take a little work, though, with parents and kids, right? They don't understand these jobs. They think they're dirty. Any of you ever been to the Kia manufacturing plant? Are those dirty jobs? I could never get a job there. I can't operate a robot or run a computer. We have to explain to kids, manufacturing's cool. Making stuff has value. Wouldn't you like to put your stamp on it? It's a great job. You make a ton of money doing it. And so lots of opportunity. What you see on all these maps are the counties in white have a lower percentage of potential job growth in that area. The counties in gray have a good opportunity for growth. The counties in gold have significant investment from those types of industry sectors out there. So we're still tops in textiles. We're seeing some return of textiles in Georgia, although a little more focused and a little higher end than we used to. Aircraft engine parts, automotive, food processing, good opportunities in advanced manufacturing. Smaller opportunities, but still great jobs in financial services. Georgia is now one of the top states, if not the top state for financial services. The counties in gold are really where a lot of those hubs are. And I think people think, well, all that happens in Atlanta. What's in Columbus? TSYS, Synovus, all of those support companies down there. Good opportunity, good jobs in this area. I love this statistic. 70% of every transaction that you make passes through Georgia. And you guys make a lot of transactions, don't you? Yep. Healthcare, healthcare, healthcare. You've seen several slides on it before. I won't belabor it. We've got one crisis that's coming. Because without fixing healthcare in Washington or in Atlanta, we're going to have more Georgians without healthcare access, without health insurance. So we've got to take care of that issue. But we need young workers to go into healthcare fields. They will have jobs. They will be good-paying jobs anywhere in this state that they want to go. We need them here, and we need to recruit these folks into Georgia. We need 1,300 more primary care physicians in the next 6 years. Just primary care. Not all the other specialist doctors that we all need these days, right? Logistics and transportation, growing the port of Savannah. Don't overlook the port of Brunswick. Biggest port for roll-on, roll-off, biggest port for commodities trading. Continue to do great. Also, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The hub is going to grow there for cargo. Great opportunities in this area. What you see on the map, every dot is a distribution or warehouse. The counties that are colored in have a high propensity for that activity and that growth. You're seeing the build out of inland ports all over Georgia, more of a strategy there. Incredible opportunities for kids to go into the logistics field. Tourism and the creative economy. Jody knows the creative economy better than anybody. That's our movie and music industry. Continue opportunity here. We're now, we're number 3 for U.S. film production. That's actually wrong. We're number 3 worldwide. We're actually number 1 now. I got to update my slide. We're actually number 1 now for movie productions. Within the next 5 years, you'll have about 10 total movie studios on the Southern Crescent in Atlanta. 10. There's 4 on the books right now to be built out. That's, I think the governor just announced it was $72 billion last year to the state's economy. Now, it's interesting because that particular industry sector has really struggled to find workers, electricians, people to build sets. I still talk to producers and studio heads that are still flying in makeup artists from California, right? And so tons of opportunities in this area. You got to tell your kids not all of them are going to be movie stars, okay? And that's going to shock them, hurt their ego a little bit. But there's opportunities for them in the field if they're willing to go get those degrees. Tons of opportunities in the tourism industry as well. Defense contractors, we had a meeting yesterday. Chairman Belton's in the back, leads the House Committee on Military and Defense. 9 months ago, we were talking about closing military bases in Georgia and being prepared for those closures. Today, we're talking about the opportunity to see a growth in the defense industry. Fort Benning has already announced more soldiers moving there. We see what's happening in Augusta. The military is fundamentally changing the economy of Augusta. Anybody from Augusta, that region over there? A couple of you over there, you see it every day, don't you? You see these companies moving in. What do they need, though, to be successful? They need talent. And so what are we going to do to make sure that we can continue to grow this? This map basically shows you the counties in gold have over $50 million or more in defense contracts every year. And, of course, where the military bases are, where it's really, really significant. So lots of opportunities in this sector. Agriculture, y'all, if we don't get more kids to stay and be part of the ag process and farming, we're hurting ourselves long term. Little Decatur County in southwest Georgia down here, they grow enough food to feed all of Gwinnett County all year with more food left over. What are we doing to make sure that when those folks retire, that people are going into those jobs? And so anything that you can do to help us make sure that that's a priority for them, tons of opportunity in agriculture. So lots of opportunities out there, but a lot of issues that we have to address and own as a community, as a state. We can't have part of the state successful and part of it falling behind. If all of Georgia's not working, then Georgia's not working. And so our commitment is to use our new office in Tifton, our new strategic plan to help these communities, to help businesses grow. We're looking at how you grow the defense industry, how you start up more first-time businesses in our communities around Georgia, how you keep the businesses that you've got. We actually have a task force now being led by Dr. Richard Caravel, who's the president of Valdosta State, about how we get these college kids, once they graduate, to stay in those communities. How do we keep talent there? And so we'll work very closely with Steve and his team. I think it's a great partnership, what you're doing on the blueprint right now. We'll tie all that back in. And here's the critical thing. You got a lot of people running for office. Everybody seems like running for office. Not you. Okay, a couple in the back. Thank you for declaring today. You're going to have a new governor, new lieutenant governor, new secretary of state, new insurance commissioner. You're going to have 30 new state house and senate members who have already retired. You could have other people challenge sitting incumbents. When you're talking to these people, when you're going and listening to them talk, ask them what they're going to do about talent. What's their plan? I had a candidate running for statewide office the other day. I said, please explain to me your strategy for talent and workforce development in Georgia. And he goes, I'm going to get one. Wrong answer. I think you should have thought that one through before you decide to run for office. Hold them accountable, ask them the questions, and partner with us and your businesses and your community to work on these issues. I probably don't have time for any questions, Steve, but nope, I'm good. So if you want a copy of this, Matt can get it to you in PDF format or look at our website a little bit later. Thank you all for letting me be with you today.
Oh, great job. I hope you can see now the good partnership we have when I say Chris gets it about education and business inextricably linked. I hope you can see that. Just a little foreshadowing. Chris mentioned our blueprint. We've affectionately called this publication we're doing a blueprint. We now have a real name for it. It's called EdQuest. Look forward to that coming out soon, in addition to our new Econ of Ed. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But just to piggyback, EdQuest is pretty much a gap analysis, a policy gap analysis of where Georgia is compared to high-performing states and countries. What policies do they have? And we've got a stoplight, red if we're in trouble, we need more policy, yellow if it's okay, but don't mess it up, green, it's good to go. So Chris's point about some of our legislators not having a talent strategy, we're going to give it to them. And we're going to give it to you, and hopefully you can use that in your work in helping that talent pipeline. Okay, if the panel members would please come on up and take your seats. Chris mentioned the whole issue of movies and gaming and music, that whole industry. Our forum, excuse me, Dana, our forum last April was down at Pinewood, and we talked about the need to help in that talent area and how Google and the arts are working together to get creative people to work in technology. These are all pieces. We've heard of some others. I mentioned quickly the German-American Embassy and what they're doing in Coweta County and West Georgia Tech. But Chris painted a pretty dire picture of our talent pipeline. Well, our panel now is going to help us go through that issue of what are the barriers and what are some of the strategies. And again, as you read through their bios, you'll see that we have people that bring multiple voices to our stage today. Local, state, national perspective, educators that have school-based, central office, and statewide perspectives, so they bring multiple voices. Our moderator is going to be Tim Carroll. Sorry, Tim. Tim is one of our education policy fellows, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes. And Tim is with the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Aisha Ahuja is the past president of HOSA and a student at Georgia Tech. Mike Koenig is vice chair of Holder Construction. Dr. Cassandra Miller-Washington is CEO of Hutchins College and Career Academy and the executive director of CTAE down in Bibb County. And Dr. James Woodard is superintendent of Morgan County Charter School System. Okay, Tim, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. So I want to thank Chris, first of all, for setting a great stage for this conversation, particularly focusing us on what we have coming down the pipeline in the future, and where we are for our state, not just here in Atlanta, but in rural areas and other areas around the state. I want to jump right in, because we looked at some of the top rankings, particularly around talent. We looked at the jobs that are on tap for the future, and particularly the gaps in supply for talent and people. So Mike, I'm gonna jump to you first and put you in the hot seat. So you were a pretty big part of the Your Talent, Your Future report, a report issued by Accenture and the Metro Atlanta Chamber that looked at some of those gaps in detail by industry. So, when you think about those gaps, and you know that about 70% of our school-age population is not going to get a four-year degree, current population, are we doing enough for kids that are in that pipeline to make them college-ready, or how should we be addressing the needs of those kids?
So are we addressing the needs of the 70% or so that are not getting or never going to get a four-year college degree? I think the simple answer to that question is no. And the most recent data that I've seen that was shared with me was on the 2010 high school class. Out of the 2010 high school class, 22, as of I think 2015, 22% had at least a four-year degree or beyond. So at this point, at least as of the time of that data, 78% of the 2010 class still did not have a four-year degree. What's more concerning is a little bit of a breakdown of that 78%. I believe it's 53% of that class have no post-secondary credential. No credential, no degree, no diploma, no associate degree, no diploma. So of that 78%, 53% have nothing as far as post-secondary work is concerned. And only 7% have either a diploma, a credential, or an associate degree. So again, that's what's important. Only 7% have an associate degree or a credential. So if for those that are doing the math, according to the data, you're missing 18%, they're still enrolled in some kind of post-secondary. I don't know where they are, but there's 18% still, as of that time, still enrolled. So again, 22% already have a four-year degree, 53% don't have anything, and only 7% have a post-secondary credential. So the question I always ask is, what are we doing for them? We're doing plenty for the 22% as a society and as a state and as a federal policy, but what are we doing for the 78%? Or more importantly, what are we doing for the 53% that never got any kind of post-secondary credential? I think most of us, I think this is the choir in this room, would agree that the career and technical education system, the CTAE system, is probably the best option we have for helping support and get that 53% on the right path and showing them the opportunities and connecting them to those opportunities. The problem we have, again, is most students that are even in the CTA pathways in Georgia do not even continue on to their technical colleges. I don't know the percentage, maybe you all know, but the majority don't continue on. So even when we have them in a pathway, they're not continuing on and they're not doing that. So you asked what can we be doing to address those needs. I think that, again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but I think every student would benefit from career and technical education, even those that are getting a four-year degree. I think every student would get some benefit towards their career readiness, regardless of what career they pursue. And I think every CTAE student would benefit, and almost ideally should, in my mind, I'd almost like it to be at least highly encouraged, if not required, for every CTAE student to either be doing dual enrollment or move on when ready or work-based learning, at least by the time that they're a senior. I think if we made more purposeful efforts to make that happen, we'd be putting a big dent in making, lowering the percentage and getting those percentages up that are getting some kind of post-secondary credential.
Thanks, Mike. Cassandra, I want to come to you, because talking about that need for attainment, as you're president of a college and career academy, and how are you connecting employers with those students to make sure that we're hitting some of those gaps in how we're training kids?
Good morning. The first thing, as the CEO of Hutchins College and Career Academy and serving in a dual capacity of CTAE director, it's imperative that I am at the table and that I build a relationship that's collaborative. So that way I can understand the need of the current industry that is in the community and incoming needs, and then aligning the pathways to those needs, and then connecting to post-secondary to offer TCCs, which are your stackable credentials. So that way kids leave with the credentials they need to be prepared to go directly into the workforce or to post-secondary, which will give them a heads up, which will allow them to be ahead of others, and that way they can finish college early and return back to the community ready to work. I think that's very important. It's also important to have those individuals on your advisory councils, so that way you can stay current. Having them as part of your governing board. The economic development definitely needs to be a part of your governance board. You need to have your chamber as well in the school, and that way you're keeping the teachers, principals, and the entire school district, because by the time the students get to the College and Career Academy, they really need to have their mind made up, so we need to start earlier. We definitely need to move down to the elementary level, so we need everyone to be a part of that conversation. So serving as the CEO, I really look at myself as being the collaborative person, developing those relationships, making sure that all of the key stakeholders are at the table.
Great. And James, I want to come to you and talking about stakeholders. I think you probably have a very unique perspective on this, having come from as a classroom teacher and then moving into the State Department of Education with a focus on CTE and career and technical education. You've had a hand in those career pathways that have been mentioned. Can you talk about why those pathways are important and what that means to K through 12 education, in particular some of the issues Cassandra has mentioned?
Absolutely, and yeah, I'm not a millennial, but I am reading from my phone today, so keeping notes, okay? We had the opportunity in 2005 to re-engineer career and technical education, and in our first meeting, and I think today's topic, closing the talent gap, is really important, to not thinking that we were closing the talent gap at that time, but just sitting down with our staff and 2 hours of brainstorming what I call that day the misconceptions of vocational education. And what were the key misconceptions that were preventing us from gaining the students' interest in some of those career and technical classes? And you know, we talked about the cows and plows and sows of agriculture, and the typing of business, and the stitching and cooking of family and consumer science. And we knew that day we weren't going to change some of those misconceptions, but we knew that if we treated reality as our friend, and knowing that hope wasn't going to be a strategy, and we actually began creating some momentum around this new world of career and technical education, we had to do three things. One, we had to connect with the kids. There are a lot of careers out there that are so far removed from some of the rural areas that we talked about that they can't even see what exists. I grew up in a very rural area. To know that I was sitting in front of you today was a long way from what I thought I could do one day. But probably more important, we had to figure out how to get away from that parents' misconception of some of the dirty jobs. Because we could create the interest in the kids, but when they got home and mentioned manufacturing to the parent, oh no, you're going to college. And so that was an important part of trying to, create a marketing plan that would entice the parents to understand the reality of the job force of the future, and to allow their kids to buy into that. And the third piece was creating the industry connections. We could sit around at the State Department of Education and come up with some great ideas, but if it really didn't connect to the industry, then that was a big challenge. I did a lot of my research work in the area of counseling, and I found that was another area that we really had to hone in on. I see Dr. Barrow up there, and he allowed me to do some of my research in his county in Fayette, and really focus in on counselors' perceptions of career pathways, because most often they are the gatekeepers. The kid can come in with a plan, but if the counselor doesn't totally understand that and think still of the old mindset that we're all going to college, I think all kids need some post-secondary credentialing of some type, and we can make that happen in high schools, but we've got to change the walls of our high schools. We can't just be boxed in. And one example of that this year, we can't sustain an automotive program with the number of kids or the price of automotive equipment in Morgan County. So we've partnered with Georgia Piedmont Technical College who is using the Newton College and Career Academy environment, and we're taking the kids over at night so that 3 kids who have that interest have the opportunity to be in automotive education. So it gives kids a sense of direction. It gives them a focus. I was a floundering student in the 10th grade, was going nowhere fast, and I got tuned into ag education. I didn't know that it would lead to being a superintendent or State Department of Education or even a teacher at that point. But it was a broad area pathway that caught my interest, kept me engaged in school, and as a result of that, some 35 years later, I have the opportunity today to share with you some of the things that we're doing in Morgan County and have done in the past in keeping kids engaged in school, creating a rigorous, engaged classroom for all kids.
Great, thank you. And I want to stick on that high school experience piece. Aisha, I'm going to come to you. You saw CTAE as a pathway, not just a curriculum pathway, but a pathway to something different. Do you want to talk about your experience with CTAE?
Yeah, of course. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. So I really want to talk about how CTAE, not just CTAE, but being in a CTSO, a career technical student organization, also helped me. So what a CTSO is, you probably know of FFA, FCCLA, and those, but now it's become TSA, Technology Students of America, HOSA, healthcare, on all these different CTSOs that partner with this pathway. And I can easily say that with both, I've learned a lot. Through CTAE, I've learned what I want to do, what I want to pursue, where in the healthcare field I would like to go, because in my school particularly, on the 4th year, we could do an internship with a local hospital and do rotations and really get a feel for it at a young age, which is so huge because when I got to college, I had an upper hand and I was able to know exactly what I wanted, and because of CTSOs, I could articulate myself, I could public speak, I could give a handshake and look someone in the eye, and we all know that, I mean, millennials can't really socially interact these days. So I think that it definitely gave me an upper hand, and it made me feel that, you know, I can go into whatever field I desire, healthcare, or if I change my mind, I know that I have those skill sets, those employability skills, those soft skills that help me get there as well. And something that's very surprising that I saw was I went to GACTE, I went to the Georgia CTE conference, and I saw that there was a lot of teachers there and a lot of people who were in career technical education, but their pathways did not have a CTSO. And hearing everyone, you know, talking about the misconceptions, maybe people doing it for 4 years and not continuing on, I can see those problems being fixed with that gap, with what CTSOs can offer with the curriculum, because they are co-curricular. They're the only organizations that are, and they build on those skill sets with competitive events, with public speaking skills, leadership skills, and all of that, and I think that that will make a difference, and those are the problems that I saw, and I think that it will bridge that gap as well.
So I want to come back to that perception. I think that's a perfect word. It goes to something James was talking about too. How, in your experience, how did that perception play in, either for other students, as you were talking about CTAE, or parents, or teachers? Can you talk about maybe, you know, what did that mean to have those conversations, and how do you talk to those groups about CTAE?
Of course. So I would like to bring up a point that was previously mentioned when we were looking at the statistics on distressed states versus, you know, more stable states, or sorry, not counties. When I saw the distressed areas, I remembered a time when we were going around as state officers, so I was state officer of HOSA, and we were teaching workshops in each region. So Region 1 was the north area by Atlanta. Everyone knew what they could do. Everyone knew what HOSA was about. Everyone knew that they could compete, they could become leaders, they could go to an international conference and be able to go to Disney World and meet people from all over the world, compete there, and get recognition there. But then when I went down to Region 3, I noticed that even though they were the officers of their chapter, they were the leaders in their school for HOSA, they still had no idea that they could do so many things within the CTSO and within their pathway. And I think knowledge is a huge part of how we're going to have to deal with this problem. I think making sure they know the opportunities, we talked about that before, but I think knowing that they have all those opportunities there. I believe it was 130 career pathways are that are accounted for with the 17 career clusters we have in Georgia because of CTSOs. I read that on the recent annual report. So I think that knowing these facts, knowing that the graduation rate also is 95% for people who are involved in CTAE and a CTSO. Altogether, it's 95% compared to the rate in Georgia, which I believe is 78%. So these statistics, these facts, this knowledge, building that gap with the CTSO and the CTAE, making sure there's internships, connections, all of that, I think will play a big role. But knowledge is where it starts.
And Cassandra and James, I'll come back to you both. Do you want to talk about that interaction with parents when it comes to career pathways, career and technical education, and maybe how you've navigated those conversations?
It's very important that when you speak to parents, because a lot of parents say, I want to do 4 years. And that is still part of CTAE. CTAE is not for a certain child. CTAE is for all students. And to be prepared when you leave high school to really be college and career ready, you need to take part of CTAE because it is exposure. It gives a student an opportunity to really decide what my next steps will be. And she hit it right on the nail with CTSOs, having leadership, being able to get in front of people and speak, being able to shake hands, being able to network. That's a part of classes that are not going to happen in necessarily math or English. You're actually getting the academics. CTAE is the application. It's really showing you the relevance of the academics and how that will play long term. And that's why it's not just for one student, it's for all kids. So when I'm talking with parents, I will simply say, what is your child going to major in? And they'll say business or engineering. That is a CTAE pathway. So why not give that student an opportunity to be exposed to it for free instead of going off to a 4-year institution and deciding that that's not what I want to do. We also tell parents that it's internships connected, and you want to give parents an opportunity to really see it and explain it. And it is knowledge, really explaining it, because most parents are a little bit older, so they don't understand career tech. They understand the old term of vocational, which makes them think that my child is not capable, that they're taking the easy route. CTAE is for all kids. It's looking at one end of the spectrum all the way to the other to make sure that all kids graduate college and career ready.
That's good. And James, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just take a parent's perspective on that. My daughter graduated from high school in 2014, and prior to that, you know, we attended a lot of parent-teacher sessions with her, and then especially in high school, as we went through those series of meetings, you know, it was all focused on graduation requirements. Since we've been in Morgan County, I have a 10th grader now, and when we go, my wife and I go to the parent meetings, the first conversation is more about the career. You know, what career pathway are you pursuing? And then from there, diving down into, you know, what's the most appropriate pathway to be able to land in that career. Is it a technical college route? Is it an industry credential? Is it actually training within an industry? Or is it a traditional 4-year route? So we're changing the conversation with the parents, diving, and it's hard, and that's the reason I really appreciate career pathways being so broad, because if you take a European model where it's so focused, sometimes parents are saying, my child is not going to be a bricklayer, but they can understand the fact that they could be in the construction world and a broad understanding of construction and trying to find out where they will fit as they go through their post-secondary training.
That's very good. I want to go back to the graduation rate. And James, with your experience both the classroom and at the state, how do you explain that difference between the state graduation rate and the higher graduation rate for CTAE students? What do you think that's attributed to?
my representative is Dave Belton's in the audience with us, and we always have a lot of conversations about data. And I look at the cause and effect of that 94.9, 95%, and I try to think through, you know, was it because of the career pathway itself, or was it the parts that were leading up to the student staying engaged in school that was the effect of the graduation rate? I look at it as a business industry model. It's basically recruitment and retention. At the very onset, grabbing that kid's attention. And I'm very appreciative over the past 12 years, the Department of Education has recognized the career awareness aspect that can occur in grades K-5, and then the exploration that can occur in grades 6-8. And then that really helps those kids understand what could be a couple of pathways, and not necessarily always having to lock them in at the 9th grade, but maybe by the 10th grade or 11th grade, they're getting more tuned into a specific career pathway. And by the time they're hooked, you know, that's the recruitment piece, we've also got to make sure the retention piece is there. And that, you know, sequencing, and I go back to the old, and I know I'm here today, and this is an old international paper model called the Union Camp curriculum model, but it was what was the philosophy behind designing the career pathways was giving 2 to 3 courses of interest and connection to skill development with an industry recognition that would be able to get teachers engaged in really delivering that at industry expectation, but then also having the kid knowing that at the end, there's a value-added aspect to my high school diploma. I'm not just walking across the stage with a high school diploma. I'm walking across with skill development recognized by this industry that I can be proud of. And as a part of that, creating some competitiveness along the way, creating some leadership skills, building, some people call them soft skills, I call them hard skills, because I think they're hard to embrace and develop. And we've created a culture called CASH, K-A-S-H, knowledge, attitudes, skills, and habits. It's a K-12 culture that we're creating in our school system. And you put all those things together, and when that kid walks across the stage and shakes the superintendent's hand with that diploma, it's not just the high school diploma. It's all these other aspects that makes them a valuable employer in their next step.
That's very good. I want to stick on that industry side. Cassandra, I'm going to come back to you. You started in industry and you have a career in the hospitality industry, and now you've been at CTAE and classroom level, district level, and now at your college and career academy. Can you comment on the value for the options that kids have in these various pathways?
Yes, it's important that kids have an opportunity to experience careers before they leave. And having youth apprenticeship, work-based learning opportunities for a student where they can leave school, still receive credit while they're working, allows them to actually gain soft skills and hard skills. It allows them to experience their future job. It gives them an opportunity to decide, is this something that I could do for the rest of my life? So giving them that opportunity allows kids to really develop. And it also allows them to make a connection from what they've learned in school. Also, having them give the opportunity to look at the career pathways. And you have a broad selection. You can look at a career cluster. And I like the example with the construction, because construction, a lot of people tend to shy away because they think about a low end. But do they ever think about those are the kids that could also be the project managers? Those could be the individuals that can own a construction company. So when you're thinking about a pathway, it is direction. I always explain to students, it's like a compass. You can go many different ways within this pathway. You're not just selecting culinary arts to be a chef. You have different options within this pathway. So you're going to be exposed to the different facets of the pathway. And then you connect it with real world experience. You bring industry in as well to actually speak to students and show them the different jobs within the CTAE pathways. So it's very important that we have not just pathways, but we have many pieces. We have the CTSOs, we have work-based learning. So when a kid walks away, they truly are college and career ready. It is important now to add the Move On When Ready, the dual enrollment, because that allows a student to walk across that stage with stackable credentials. It gives a student not just a high school diploma, it gives them an additional credential that allows them to go directly to work and be ahead, not coming in at the low end of a job. On top of that, it is telling the student, I've also had experience. So I know what it means to be on time. I know what it means to be a great employee. I actually have that opportunity now. And that's important when you're looking at CTAE from the big picture, not just offering the classes. It has to have all of the pieces for a student to truly leave and be college and career ready.
Very good. Mike, I want to come back to you from construction industry perspective and from your role. What do you see that businesses, not just in construction, but across these talent gap industries, what can they do to better engage with these CTAE and school programs?
So everywhere I go, everywhere, industry engagement, industry engagement, industry engagement. I keep hearing that. It comes up in every study, and almost weekly now, another report comes out, another set of case studies comes out, talks about all the ways to engage industries. I'll just give you a quick reality check. When I go out and speak to my industry, and I speak to employers, and I ask, almost all the time, the first question I ask is, how many of you have ever heard of CTE or Georgia CTAE? On average, the number of hands that go up is less than 10%, and it's usually good if it's 10%. So the point is, most people don't even know what that means, and they're not aware, and if anything, I think there's a myth that only occurred to me recently that I'm realizing even I've gotten sucked into, that we have all, at least I feel like a lot of us go around tell the story of how in the 90s we pulled vocational education out of the high schools, and it doesn't exist. And I finally, after even saying that myself for years, have recognized that's not true. You know, we have, there's almost 180, 200 schools across the state of Georgia that have construction, some element of a construction pathway. So that's almost half of the schools in Georgia still have construction to some degree in their schools. So the lesson is taking ownership the industry needs to first be aware, take ownership for our pipeline. And one of the things we did in the construction industry is we pushed a model of just encouraging our members. We call it just adopt a school, but basically just go to the school in your own backyard and find out, go meet the instructor, go find out do they have a construction pathway, find out what you can do to support that. And we've had tremendous success with that around the state. We've had a number of our contractors in the industry make those kind of connections. So I think at a hands-on level, that level of engagement is critically important. But I'll just quickly jump on my soapbox for just a second while I have the floor and tell you that I don't know about everybody else as you sit here and listen to Cassandra and James, but not every school district has a Cassandra and a James. And in many cases, my experience is CTAE is maybe if they even have somebody dedicated to that as at least one of their primary responsibilities, they're in the back of the school. If they even have that person, they're not getting the importance. And again, I go back to 70% of our population is never going to get a 4-year degree. I think personally the CTAE person in the school should probably be the second most important person in the school behind the principal. But I think we all know that's not typically the case. So supporting that and putting our money where our mouth is critically important as a society. And I think the obvious example at the federal level is the federal policy in Perkins and supporting career and technical education, both at the federal and the state level. And I just simply want to say that my little soapbox, I believe that if we're going to address the workforce issues in our country and the skills gaps in the issues in this country, we can deal with that on the proactive side or we can deal with that on the reactive side. And I hope you all know what I mean by that. Clearly, the proactive side is the education side. And I simply, for those, I think almost everyone in this room will appreciate this, I think if we spent the $3.5 to $4 billion a year we spend on WIOA, on the reactive side, if we spent that on the proactive side, eventually we wouldn't need the the proactive side. We wouldn't need the reactive side. If we spent the $3.5, $4 billion on Perkins and on the proactive, does that make sense?
Yes.
Preaching to the choir?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Mike, you made a point about the misconception of being on the backside of the school or down the hall. That was one of the misconceptions we came to understand and appreciate that we had to deal with. And I'm very appreciative of the Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle's initiatives for the college and career academies, because if you're a community that receives one of the grants and you create that career academy, that becomes almost a front of your school. That creates that revolving door approach with business and industry into your school, and that's the face of the school, and it's really made a lot of difference in the engagement of industry in those school systems.
And we're going to move to audience questions in just a minute. Aisha, I want you to just maybe wrap us up on this and talk about the relevance for you when you were in high school. What drew you to CTAE specifically and to the pathway that you chose? And then did you think that there would be a barrier, maybe that there wasn't? Or did you think that it was going to lead you somewhere different? Well, talk about your perception of it.
Sure. So I moved from an area where career technical education wasn't prominent, and I moved to an area, Forsyth County, where it was huge. They had the biggest FBLA chapter, the biggest HOSA chapter, the third largest FCCLA chapter, and then all the pathways. They had pathways for every single CTSO. So I came into it not knowing really what I wanted to do. I knew I had a passion for global health, but I didn't know how I could get involved in that. And my freshman year, I actually wasn't in the pathway because I couldn't get in the pathway in time because of my moving. So I remember walking through the hallways and seeing all these posters of kids in like doctor outfits. And I was like, what's going on? How are they doing this? So I walked into the healthcare room, and my advisor, my teacher, she talked to me about, what CTAE is, what CTSOs are. And when she did it, it was very conversational. And I think one thing that is really important to talk about is that this is not just a great program for educating students, but it's also really fun. You get to build your resume by doing community service. So there's a service project where at your school level, you can do community service with your CTSO, and then you can also go to conferences, meet industry professionals. That's where I decided I wanted to do biomedical engineering, because I met somebody who was a telemedicine director, and they talked about all these creations that you can do through technology and medicine, and I was astounded. I didn't know that existed until I went to a conference. You can compete, so you can add on to the skills you have in your curriculum with your pathway and pick a competition that directly correlates with your interest. So because we have CTAE and CTSOs that go with it, that are co-curricular, it's a program that cannot be defeated by any other. I honestly believe that. I've seen it work in so many different ways. I've seen people go to amazing universities because they were involved in this. I've seen people who stand out in this day and age, in my age group, because of this. I can tell when someone was a part of a CTSO, a part of CTAE, because of just how they talk. I'll go up to them at Georgia Tech and I'll be like, were you in HOSA? And they're like, yeah, and I can just tell because of how they hold themselves. And I think that if we bring this to Georgia and if we really make it a big thing and we work at it, we work hard at it, we could have a population of skilled workers. We can close that talent gap, and we can fulfill the desires of everyone in this room, honestly.
Okay, now it's your turn to ask some questions of our panel. We have some microphones, so if you'll raise your hand, and Steve and Dana will bring a microphone to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So several of you mentioned the technical college system or relationships with them, and that's, I think, a big piece of this conversation here that we've all just indirectly talked about. So I was wondering if you could more directly talk about your relationships with Technical College System of Georgia, what that looks like, and just sort of efforts going forward around that.
I'll be glad to start. We're situated with the regional area for Georgia Piedmont Technical College, And as we wrote the College and Career Academy grant, they were a major partner with us in receiving that grant. It's important that understanding a small rural school system, we have a little over 3,000 kids, one high school, one middle school, one elementary, and one primary. We don't have student numbers and a tax base that can sustain all of the career pathways that exist. And so we have to reach out with partnerships such as Georgia Piedmont Technical College to allow them to come in our building and allow our kids to go into their satellites to be able to participate in career pathways that we cannot sustain from a teacher base within the school system. So the example I gave with automotive, we have some kids interested in that. We can't afford the automotive program. Couldn't afford to sustain the equipment, the lab, in relation to 3 or 4 kids. So partnering with the technical college allows the student to receive that automotive training through the technical college. Same thing with cosmetology. We also have a relationship with Georgia Military College, so our academic dual enrollment programs are offered through the college there. But it just gives our kids the opportunity to leave high school with a post-secondary credit through a technical college. It's the aim of the president of the technical college and myself to stand on the same stage at graduation, and as kids walk across and receive their high school diploma, he's there in line to offer them their technical college program diploma. So that's the focus we have in making that partnership with the technical college work. Very important. Thank you for that question.
Oh, thank you. Excuse me. My name is Orrin Hudson with Be Someone. I was very flattered when I heard Dr. James Woodard mention about the cash. 17 years ago, I wrote a song about the cash. Cash is king, knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits. But more importantly, I engage young people through the game of chess and teach them 6 magic words. Take time to think things through. And I use chess as a metaphor that every move you make matters. And my message is heads up, pants up, grades up, and the big one, never give up. So I'm living my dream because teaching the kids makes my heart sing, and I would love to see how I can serve anyone who's in this building.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad all this is happening. I also want to encourage students to realize that if they learn some of these technical skills, they can pay their way to have a 4-year or graduate program. A friend of mine got her PhD because she could make a lot working as a nurse on the weekends. And so you never know how that's going to enable more education. But what I always say, anytime I hear this topic come up, is I would like it to be more college, career, and citizenship ready. That I think that their lives are not going to be just on the job. And I'm interested in how whatever programs you're involved in can help them be aware not only how to be a voter, but a good neighbor, a community person, family member, and all of that as well. And a good reader.
So Cassandra and James, do you want to talk about, does that early college, that early credit as part of high school education, how does that play into how parents and community receive CTAE?
I think it is actually over the past maybe 2 or 3 years we've turned to another direction. Actually being able to give students the opportunity to walk away with post-secondary credit and actually have those credits transfer actually has allowed parents to look at CTAE differently and look at the program differently, because that allows a student to go in and be prepared. And that's the key that we want to make sure that we stress to parents, that we want kids to leave college and career ready. And I like how she talked about character and citizenship, because that's a big piece that falls into the CTSOs. And that is a key in every CTSO of learning how to give back, learning how to be true to yourself. And so it's very important when you think about CTAE, you look at it as really preparing kids to graduate college and career ready and to be ready to go into the community and be a strong piece in the community. And having those skill sets from post-secondary allows them to walk into college ready. And that's the key. We don't want them to walk in and have to start from the bottom and they've been in high school. You want them to start in their classes and really be ready for post-secondary opportunities.
We've also talked about a lot about the balance. We went, 70s was probably really focused on the vocation. The pendulum swung over here till everybody's going to college. I think we're right in the middle now. And that balancing piece, my son's an 11th grader. He's in AP classes. He's probably going to pursue a college degree in agriculture. But he's also, as 11th grader, participating in an internship on the farm, gaining those type of experiences to maybe to help hone in on what area of agriculture he really wants to participate in. And, you know, the cash piece is bringing in those knowledge and attitudes. You know, this week we're focused on handshake and eye contact. Very simple, but, you know, it's not always simple to get a good handshake in life. And I'm determined that when the kid graduates from our school system, when they walk across stage for graduation, they will give me a good handshake. And if it takes 12 years to make that happen, we'll make it happen.
If I could just interject, it's a little related to the first part of what you said, but the parent pride topic came up a lot during our discussion at the beginning, and I just want to give just a different perspective on that. As you know, I know I represent the construction industry, and I'm going to say this sarcastically, we have no image or perception issues. Everybody wants their kid to go into construction. So, but the different view that I offer on that is that I believe that I do think, you know, we need to address that. We can't ignore it. But I don't think a marketing or a campaign or a campaign or to change perception. I think that if we changed, my argument is that if employers started valuing career and technical education, I think, and we showed up with jobs, and we had these internships while they're in high school, and we had jobs for them when they graduate, or apprenticeships opportunities. I personally think the image will follow, that the parents and the students' attitude will follow. So that's just a different perspective on that. And I made your comment reminded me, your first part about, I used to start when I spoke at the Governor's High Demand Career Initiative a couple years ago at one of their listening events. I started out with my first statement was, technical schools are for the stupid kids. And then I paused and I explained where that quote came from. That quote came from the technical teachers at the Georgia CTE conference. They're the ones, and you can appreciate where they were coming from, right? There was a frustration. They were venting and saying that perception back to me, that perception was out there. And anyway, Gretchen Corbin, our commissioner of the technical colleges, responded with a statement that I thought was pretty profound, and that is, you know, again, you know, when you appreciate, to your first point, that a kid can go to school for little or no cost, graduate with little or no debt, and have a job immediately that can support themselves and a family, you know, those kids are the smart ones.
That's great. We have time for one last question.
Thanks for your comments. My questions kind of pertain to a lot of different statements that were made on the panel. We talked a lot about changing parents' perceptions of CTAE. Another point that Dr. Woodard mentioned was the role of counselors as gatekeepers. So my question is, has there been any thought given to a strategic plan or outreach plan to build capacity amongst counselors in regards to creating pathways or educating students and families about the value of CTAE?
One of the components of counselors is that we're trying to get counselors to participate in externships. A lot of counselors have been a part of just the school and counseling students and really developing their graduation plan. They've been focused on one task. Now it's time for them to truly understand what manufacturing looks like, what does construction look like, looking at the different pathways and the opportunities that they can provide. So allowing a counselor to participate in an externship is life-changing. Several counselors have been to Kia, they've been to other companies, and they come back and say, wow, I did not know that robotics plays a part. And when you think about that, they're talking to kids that are talking about going into robotics. That is a piece of the puzzle that you can share with them. So it's really shifting the mindset of the counselor, changing the work, so that way they can look at it from a big picture. But a lot of times they need to see it and be a part of the conversation. So that's why it's imperative that all stakeholders are at the table when you're talking to business and industry, not just the CTAE director, but the counselor, teachers, principals, superintendents, because that's how you change the school system. That's how you really get the school system to become a collaborative partner with the industry.
One thing we did locally, don't go back and tell my board in Morgan County that we did this, okay? But my first year as superintendent, you have some sort of a honeymoon phase. And the first position that I added was a director of career pathways, career pathway coordinator, whatever. But the intent of hiring that person was to be able to promote these pathways and develop them for the kids so that, and create that conversation with the parents. And one of the things we're real proud of, still as a parent, last year, I attend as a parent, just as, with the superintendent's hat sort of tucked behind me. But, 95% of our high school parents attended a support session for their child and helping determine what their classes would be for the upcoming year related to the career pathway. Now, to get 95% of primary school parents, we can do that. That's real easy. All those guys want to come. But to get 95% of the high school parents to actually attend a session with a teacher as an advisor, that's a pretty amazing thing to do. And we were able to do that through career pathway coordination through that one person. So that was a local initiative we took place.
That's good. All right, last word from our panelists. Aisha, start with you. Any last thought you want to leave?
Sure. Ooh, my voice is going. So I wanted to add one more thing to that before I say my last words, but I think we don't really appreciate how much parents actually want to be involved, especially nowadays with it being so competitive. And the more events we have at a local level, I'm telling you, they're going to show up. That was a direct example, and that's just making sure that they're knowledgeable about what is going on, what their child can get involved in, and I think that initiative was amazing. But last words, I just wanted to say that it's been great being here and talking to you guys, and you all come from way different aspects of education, and it's been an honor to know that I can talk to you about my experience and what has happened to me and what has allowed me to become the best version of myself. I did not think 5 years ago I would be able to do this, even speak in front of anyone. I was this nervous freshman, so shy, did not know what I wanted to do with my life, and career technical education saved my life. So I really hope that this helps you guys understand how impactful it is. I know so many students who've done the same exact thing and owe it to career technical education and being a part of a CTSO. Any CTSO, it could be TSA, FCCLA, FFA, all of them, Skills USA. There's so many different pathways, like I said, 130 different ways they can go, and then little facets in each of those. So it's quite remarkable what this program is, and I really hope that you look more into it. Thank you.
Mike?
That was awesome. I hate to follow that, but just a quick comment about the counseling. The comment's been made that most counselors haven't been trained to be, they've been trained to be academic counselors, not career counselors or career guidance. I know the DOE is doing a pilot with career coaches, and I appreciated what you guys shared. We don't have enough counselors, even if they were trained. That has to be resolved. We need a collective voice to make that happen. We need to do more career guidance and more counseling. As someone who's personally used as a mentor the U-Science assessment, I think assessments like that that look beyond just interest but looked at aptitudes is very powerful. So my simple statement is we need to be looking at what works and do more of that.
And I would just leave with talking about a college and career academy. It's imperative that hopefully with Lieutenant Governor we can have a college and career academy. Students can have access to it, because having a governance board that will allow you to have key players in the school daily that can impact kids will allow us to grow CTAE and truly be the face of the district. A college and career academy can change a community, and that's the key component with CTAE as well.
I had the opportunity several years ago to participate in a grand opening of Career Academy that we built in Newton County. And the Sunday morning before, I heard a verse at church that I made. It just stuck with me. I think it was one of those things that was sent to me. But the quote is, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. Mind your own business. Boy, I'd love to teach 8th graders that. Okay. But the next piece, work with your hands so that you may win the respect of outsiders and so that you don't become dependent on anybody. I think, as the former Department of Labor Commissioner Michael Thurman used to say, there is dignity in work. And I would say, add to that, there is passion in a career. And so this earlier we can connect these kids to a career interest and a career pathway, they can begin to own their own learning plan, to become a lifelong earner, so that at the end they can become a service to others. They can be a servant to others. And that's my passion in education. And really, at the end of the day, when we think about these career pathways, that's really what they should be aiming to do, is create servants in our community. So thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Wow, that's a great way to wrap that up. Panel, thank you very much. Tim, great facilitator. It's always good to have a business leader who understands ed policy like you do to have that conversation. A couple more minutes and I'll get you out of here quickly. On the left side of your folder in the back, there are 2 more pieces of paper there. One is our Education Policy Fellows class for this year. From a large pool of candidates, we were able to select these 19 people. This is our 10th class. It's hard to imagine we've been doing this now for a whole decade. Any of our ed policy alums and our current class here, would you please stand up? EPFP alums and class? Let's give them a round of applause. Like our panel, like the partnership, our EPFP fellows are business, government, foundation, community, education leaders. So if you'd like to be involved in that, think about applying for next year. The last page, I gave you a little hint of this earlier. Our 5th edition of the Economics of Education will be hard copies coming out soon, but you can get electronic copies right now. The flip book is on our website. It gives that whole idea of the birth to work pipeline. And of course, as you get more into that, you realize it's not really a pipeline, it's really cyclical. So go to that and enjoy that if you would. We'll be doing a roadshow and coming across the state to communities near you very soon. On the other side is an article by Caitlin Darty-Kokinas, who's been our timekeeper down here today. Caitlin did an article for us in James Magazine. This one's on the child well-being and a focus on a part of child well-being, which is the school nutrition piece. The yellow page, if you would like to be on our distribution list so you can get information about our forums, about the release of our education policy, fellows application, any of that, just leave this at the table on the way out, and we'd be glad to add you to our list. And another thank you to AT&T for being the sponsor of these forums 3 times a year. There's a page there at the end that Milford always likes for me to talk about, or he'll do it for us, is if you'd like to contribute to our work. We have a big team of 7 people, the partnership. Your contributions help us do this work, so if you'd like to go online, here is the easy directions on how to do that. As you can see in the back, our program today has been recorded. It will be on our website in the next couple of days. So if you'd like to share this information with some of your friends, or they were not able to attend and knew they wanted to come, let them go to our website and see this. It might be informative to them. And last thing is there were some resource materials on the table outside. If you didn't see those when you came in, be sure to pick some of those up on your way out. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Drive safely back to home and work.